Hey guys, it's me. So today I want to talk about Star Trek Into Darkness. Michael and I went to go see this over the weekend with a couple of our friends, and I thought I would share my thoughts with you on the movie. This is going to be a spoiler review, so if you haven't seen the movie yet and you don't want spoilers, go ahead and click on something else and just come back when you're ready. The first thing I want to talk about, of course, are the good parts about this movie. And before I start off, I will go ahead and just let you know that I am a purist when it comes to Star Trek. So intrinsically, I take issue with the reboot to begin with, but I did my best to like it and to enjoy it for what it was. But, I don't know. So the first good part about this movie was the composition. It was truly beautiful to behold. The visuals were great, absolutely fantastic, really crisp, very clear. I did go see this in IMAX 3D, and it was really quite an experience. Everything was really vivid, really brought to life in a really believable sort of way. I love the hovercrafts and the extra buildings that they put around where they filmed the actual movie, around Starfleet Academy. I happen to know what building that is, and it is not surrounded by many other buildings as they would have you think. So they integrated that beautifully, especially for me looking at a building that I recognize and that I know very well, and seeing how seamlessly they incorporated the rest of the academy and the rest of the surrounding city into that set and into those shots was great. Again, the hovercrafts and other things on Earth were really well done. Nothing was too cartoonish. I am thinking about the Star Wars prequels when I say that. There was nothing really cartoonish about it. It was all pretty believable and pretty nice, especially in 3D. The next thing that I really liked about this movie were certain scenes. I will preface this by saying that there are a lot of plot holes in this movie, but some of the scenes were still really well acted and really well directed and just well written. Pretty funny. I don't know if there needs to be this much humor in Star Trek, but it was still enjoyable, and so I will put it in the good category and try not to be too much of a bitch about it. The first one that I think of is Kirk and Spock being reprimanded by Pike after their little adventure onto the planet that is the first place that we see in the movie. They have gone ahead and saved the planet from being destroyed somehow by a single volcano, and there is a question of the Prime Directive in Kirk going in and rescuing Spock and making the Enterprise visible to the indigenous people of that planet. In any case, the banter between Spock and Pike was really good. Spock is funny, he's sarcastic. I don't know how I feel about that, but the scene itself was well written and well acted. Zachary Quinto is great, so I really, really liked that. And Kirk was also good in this scene. Pike's reprimand of him and his lack of responsibility and lack of taking responsibility for his actions was probably the closest that this movie got to the values of Starfleet. So I have to give it a thumbs up in that area, because that's at least one part where they haven't totally forgotten what Star Trek is about. The next scene that I liked was between Spock and Uhura, and this was in more than one scene, but their relationship takes on a little bit of difficulty in this movie, and you see that she is upset with him regarding his actions in the first part of the movie, again on the planet with the volcano. And she felt like he didn't care about whether or not he died and what it would do to her, and, just didn't feel anything. And so she was kind of getting on his case about that. It serves as a way to get to know the characters a little bit better, and to get to know their relationship a little bit better between Spock and Uhura. It was good in like a big budget Hollywood movie romance kind of way. They made it quippy, they made it funny, but still kind of emotional, and again, serving a purpose as far as getting to know the characters a little bit better. The actors are good, they did a good job here. But she has a good point, I think, as far as, why she would feel that way. As a female, I could understand why she would feel that way. And he explains his own feelings pretty well, so it was pretty well done. I like that. I'm not sure how I feel about this new super emotional Spock in this reboot of Star Trek, but I guess we will see. And the last thing that was good about this movie, or at least the last thing on this list of good things about this movie that stood out to me, were scenes of the Enterprise rising out of stuff. They rise out of clouds, rise out of water, all kinds of stuff. It was well done. Again, it was another example of beautiful visuals in this movie. I did feel like I was getting hit over the head a little bit with like the whole Enterprise rising thing. Like, I get it. I get the motif. I get, that it's like a metaphor and whatever, but, it was really beautifully done though, so it was good. But this is already starting to turn into the next section of this review, which is the bad. Now, my list that I have here of things that I thought were bad about this movie is pretty long. So I'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. It's quite a bit longer than the things I thought were good. So the main thing that was bad, though, of which everything else I'm going to mention that was bad is a part, is the plot. There were so many holes in this plot and so many things that were wrong from a Star Trek point of view, or didn't make sense, or were pointless. So let's just talk about some of the plot holes here. I just went through and sort of tried to remember everything that I thought, God, doesn't make sense. The first thing that doesn't make sense, or the first thing that was wrong, was the anti-gravity. When the Enterprise is in a free fall, the anti-gravity situation was wrong. The gravity systems on the Enterprise are supposed to kind of work a certain way, and gravity is supposed to kind of work a certain way. And this is not the first time that they screw up science in this movie. And I'm by no means a scientist, I'm an art history major, but I didn't suck at science, and I've watched enough Star Trek. So the original timeline of Star Trek was very insistent on getting everything scientifically correct that they possibly could. They spent a lot of time researching, they used a lot of NASA's research, and they really made the effort to make it as scientifically accurate as they possibly could without actually going out and exploring the universe themselves. The gravity situation was just incorrect. It made for a good scene because you see Kirk running through the Enterprise, and it's like running on the side of the walls and blah blah blah, and it added like a good visual sort of dimension to the movie. But it was wrong, and so it bothered me for that reason. They should have all actually been kind of floating around, since the gravity systems don't work anymore, but whatever. The way that they work is that they pull down, and so if they go offline, then you should be floating, not pulled up or to the side or really anywhere with any type of gravity, because it's off. The next big problem with this movie is the interpretation of the Prime Directive. This is a big part of Star Trek, and you cannot fuck this up. It's the Prime Directive. This is basically like the number one thing with Starfleet. You can't fuck up the Prime Directive. You can't fuck up the interpretation of the Prime Directive throughout a movie in which the Prime Directive plays an enormous part. One of the things that was wrong, for example, about the interpretation of the Prime Directive in this movie was Spock when he turns in Kirk. And he thinks he's following the rules, and I can't break any rules, and blah, blah, blah. But he was breaking the rules himself by being in the volcano on the planet to stop it from being incinerated in the first place. That in and of itself is a violation of the Prime Directive, because they are interfering with the fate of that species, which is something that Pike brings up in his reprimand of them, but nothing really ever comes of that. Spock just gets kicked out of the office for having a smart mouth and presumably never gets in any type of trouble for anything. Speaking of volcanoes destroying entire planets, there's something that doesn't make any sense. But in the first scene, Spock is inside the volcano in like a special, he looks like he's dressed up like Metroid, but whatever. And he's inside an active volcano that is in the process of erupting. And I just have to wonder, what are the chances that you're inside an active, currently about to erupt, lava boiling, flying around everywhere volcano that erupts a little and destroys a nearby village, but not a single drop of lava gets on your suit. It gets within an inch of you in the spot that you're standing in, but none of it ever touches him. And then there's this whole, like, him kneeling and looking up, oh, I accept my fate thing, that, yeah, just, why? Yeah, but whatever, okay. I'm getting off track here, so I want to stick to, before this turns into just a meaningless rant, I want to stick to the notes that I actually have on this. The next thing that was bad about this was Uhura speaking Klingon to the Klingons, because that doesn't make any sense. They crossed the neutral zone to get to Kronos, and things are not real happy between the Federation and the Klingons at this point in time. And she gets all ballsy. You brought me here to speak Klingon, so let me speak Klingon. Goes outside, and out come a bunch of Klingons that look like they just stepped out of a Mortal Kombat movie, and they're talking to you, they're listening, they didn't like just kill you right there. Like, they're talking to this little woman, and they're patriarchal. They're not big on, especially like a little human woman. And they're like actually like letting her give them the business and whatever before they even, and they just like grab her face, and it's like, I guess it's supposed to be dramatic, I don't know, whatever. But it didn't really make a lot of sense that I'm supposed to think that they would forget the fact that you just crossed the neutral zone and basically invaded their territory, which is essentially an act of war, so that you could catch this other guy and think that they care about that at all because he doesn't have honor. Which the Klingon tells her, why should we care about humans killing humans? Like, we don't give a fuck. Which, you know, I get, but again, like, why is this even... Nothing comes of this, again, so why is this in the movie? There's so many things in this movie where nothing comes of it, that it's just there. It just seems like they just put it there because it seemed cool. And they thought people would enjoy it. But if it doesn't serve a purpose, I don't think that you need to put it in the movie. Speaking of things that don't serve a purpose, the Enterprise crew is basically useless. And that's kind of sad to me because the Enterprise crew has always been the finest crew in Starfleet, always. And that's kind of the idea. It's like the flagship and the best crew, and the Enterprise is always like the hardest assignment to get. And you have to be really good, and you have to be, you know, useful and fast and, you know, useful. These people are all useless, basically. In fact, pretty much all of Starfleet is apparently incompetent, except for, like, the Fabulous Five that are part of the main cast. So, I guess this is Firefly now? Or, like, the Avengers or something? Speaking of the Avengers, maybe we can make some parallels between some of the characters in Star Trek and some of the characters in the Avengers. Because I feel like I'm just watching another one of these Hollywood reboots that was just... I guess Spock would have to be the Hulk, right? Because he's the only one that's strong enough to beat down Khan because of his superhuman Vulcan strength. And Kirk would have to be Iron Man because he's a cocky son of a bitch like Tony Stark and a pain in my ass. I guess, like, there's a token chick, right? So Uhura would have to be Black Widow, which is that much funnier. So we make Bones into Thor, right? Like a little hammer. Maybe that can be like his medical instrument. I don't know. I guess Scotty would have to be Hawkeye because he's like the lamest Avenger, and I'm really starting to lose this metaphor. But it made sense for the first couple. It's like the message of, you know, if you're normal, just run, hide, scatter like roaches, and wait for these 5 awesome people to come in and save your ass. I think the movie itself is kind of a reflection of millennial narcissism. Millennials being the generation of basically teens and 20-somethings, to put it really simply. People my age, people a little younger, people a little bit older, pretty much every one of us that's on YouTube. And I think it's just a reflection of millennial narcissism in society. I mean, if I want to try to make this movie smart, and I really want to try to make this movie smart, then I would have to say that that would be part of it. Another thing that doesn't make a lot of sense is Marcus's daughter coming on board the ship and doing her thing, and the whole thing with Kirk where she gets in the shuttle and she's changing and she makes him turn around and then he checks her out in her underwear. And again, nothing ever comes of this. Like, she never hooks up with him. She's not really a useful character for the most part. Nothing that she does couldn't have been done by somebody else or required her to come in. And, you know, all it really did was by putting her on the ship and having her tell her dad, oh, you can't, you know, blow up this ship while I'm on it, and then having him take her off it, served as nothing more than another example of the one-dimensional character that is Marcus in this movie. It's like, I don't need another example of why he's a cold, heartless man that makes no fucking sense at all. But let's just put this extra character in this movie so we can make it a little bit more poignant. And I thought that that really fell flat. It did nothing for me. I felt nothing. I could care less what happens to this chick. And neither, she doesn't need to be there. Like, who are you? Go away. Speaking of Marcus, he's like the worst admiral in the history of ever, making the worst decisions in the history of decisions. I'm gonna keep this part brief and just say this guy's pretty much General Petraeus, and that's all there really is to it. Another thing that was bad about this movie was the treatment of the Enterprise, or the way the Enterprise is handled, and the way battles are handled, and just the way space combat is handled. There's pretty much no delicacy in Star Trek anymore. There's no strategy. They just throw themselves and the ship and all kinds of shit all over the place and hope it'll work. It's like 5-year-olds in space. I'm gonna bang on things and break things to try to fix things, knock things around, come in guns blazing all over the place, throw myself around, like, doesn't matter. Gone are the days of meaningful maneuvers and counter maneuvers and space battle in Star Trek. Gone are the days of that. All of that stuff, out the door. Just come in, guns blazing. Ah! Like, what is that? Terrible. And now we're getting into things that are not only terrible, the what the fuck of this movie. Like, what in the actual fuck? This is the shit about this movie that is not only bad, but it makes me fucking angry. You understand? Like, it's the kind of shit that, especially as a purist, it makes me, like, I'm just gonna call it the what the fuck. This is the good, the bad, and the what the fuck. So here we go. First what the fuck moment. Apparently, the Enterprise is now a jalopy and sucks. And basically needs to be knocked and kicked around in order to work. And it needs to be done in places where people aren't supposed to be able to get to because they fucking die if they go in there. But yeah, no, let's just send Kirk into like the warp core, basically, and he can kick it around and maybe the Enterprise will start back up again. Like, what is this? Like an old busted like Geo or something? Like, what? It's like one of those Geos you see parked on the street that was a convertible and is now half covered in duct tape because somebody slashed into it 100 times and the plastic is all yellow and disgusting. And that's the Enterprise. But like with a new coat of paint. It's like it's a jalopy, but on the bridge it looks like an Apple store. And you think, oh, this is really high tech. This is great. This is going to be awesome. Not the case. It's kind of a perfect metaphor, actually, for Apple. All shiny and pretty on the outside, sucks on the inside. But despite sucking at life, apparently the Enterprise has all the cheat codes in space. And then this is going back to what I was just saying a minute ago about them coming in with guns blazing. Like, apparently they also never run out of any type of ammunition. They can just shoot like a million torpedoes and phasers all over the place. No big deal. Like, That was actually always a big part of space battle in Star Trek, was keeping track of your ammunition. There are so many examples of moments when ammunition was a big deal. Moments when there was only one shot left and you had to make it count. Moments when you have 4% phasers left and you haven't done any damage to your opponent. I'm thinking about Nemesis. I'm thinking about Deep Space Nine. I'm thinking about tons of episodes of The Next Generation and Voyager. I mean, this is a big part. That and the strategy of how to fly the ship around and actually like do damage and have maneuvering capabilities and where are we going. It's one of the things that made Voyager a cool ship and, gave it an advantage over some of their larger, nastier opponents. And it just... No, we're just going to come and... Again, what the fuck? And again, speaking of the technology, they made it look like an Apple store and they made it too high tech. I'm sorry, but the original series, you watch it and they got switches and dials and shit like that. And they have not just upgraded switches and dials. They have pretty much made it so that a lot of the technology in this alternate reality is almost more advanced or just as advanced as a lot of the technology that we spent decades, and this is just the original series, building up to. And it's lazy. It's oh, let's just give them awesome technology and that'll sell tickets. I mean, this whole thing is just a money grabbing, ticket selling sham, in my opinion. And that makes me so sad because I truly love Star Trek. It has a very special place in my heart, and that might sound like the nerdiest thing or the saddest thing possibly, but it helps shape who I am. And so I almost take it personally when I see it get ruined by the likes of J.J. Abrams and co. So another what the fuck moment was when they go down to the first planet in the movie and Kirk and Bones are running away from these people in an effort to draw them away from where they live so that they don't get incinerated by the volcano. And I can understand that, but again, it's not relevant. The only thing that comes of that is that Kirk gets demoted. They completely miss the point of the Prime Directive because Spock never gets in trouble. And we never see or hear from this race of people again. They basically see the Enterprise rise out of the water and go to save Spock, which is the breach of the Prime Directive that he's talking about when he reports Kirk. And they all, freak out and they draw a little drawing in the sand of the shape of the Enterprise and they all start worshiping it. And I'm pretty sure this was a callback to a pretty bad episode of the original series, because in that episode they then go back to said planet where they did something similar and find that they've advanced or whatever quite a bit. So I think this is supposed to be a callback to that, although that happens way later, but whatever. And the whole planet, the aliens, all of that, no bearing on the story, because within minutes Kirk is demoted, Pike gets killed because basically everyone in Starfleet has decided to go gather exactly where they're supposed to gather in the event of what's essentially a terrorist attack by Khan when he blows up the Starfleet archives, which is how this whole thing with him starts. And so basically they make themselves readily available for the next terrorist attack. What a shocker when he shows up to blow them up. Pike gets killed, and just like that, within moments, Kirk is back in command of the Enterprise. He requests that Spock be reinstated as his first officer, and so basically the whole beginning of the movie has no bearing on the rest of the plot. Kirk's getting in trouble doesn't really amount to anything. Spock never gets in trouble, and within a few minutes, everything is back to normal. Kirk has the Enterprise back, and we're on the road. So, again, another what the fuck moment that had literally no bearing on the plot. The spacesuits, where Khan and Kirk go flying out of the Enterprise to fly into a hatch on the USS Vengeance. And I'm going to keep this one really brief. I just want to say one thing. Your physics, guys, wrong. Again, just wrong. Doesn't work that way. They only have lateral thrusters on those suits, so Khan speeding up and being able to catch up to past Kirk and make it in before him doesn't really make sense when they don't have anything that boosts speed that much. The lateral thrusters give them a little push, but they also push you to the side, so it's kind of hard to... and especially with how far off he was and the way the curve was, and I've looked into this, and I gotta just say, wrong. Another thing that was a what the fuck moment, Spock consulting original Spock is not really fair, first of all. And it seems like a violation of the temporal prime directive, although maybe they haven't figured that out yet. I can't be sure at this point. But it makes me wonder, is this going to become a regular thing? Like, is he always going to consult other Spock in every movie from now on what he should do based on what happened in the original timeline? Is that like your thin little tiny thread that you're using to link actual Star Trek with this imitation Star Trek? Like, we'll have regular Spock because he lives on New Vulcan, and so... Okay, something else. What the fuck with the unnecessary tribble? I just have a little qualm with this. And Trouble with Tribbles was not really my favorite episode of classic Star Trek. It's a classic episode, but not really my favorite, and that's compounded by the fact that they then went ahead and revisited that episode in Deep Space Nine, and that was even less of a favorite of mine. But the unnecessary tribble in this movie that Dr. McCoy has mysteriously acquired, and somehow there's just one of them. If you remember, the trouble with tribbles is that there's always way more than one of them, but he's got a dead tribble for like no fucking reason. No, where it came from. Like, does this guy just have like a bunch of dead animals? Like, what? Whatever. I don't know. But he uses the Deus Ex Machina blood, which we're going to get to, on the tribble to bring it back to life. And I can't help but think that maybe there were like some red shirts or like Pike or somebody else that you could have tested your little theory out on instead of a fucking tribble. Like, whatever. Yay, the tribble's back to life. Like, awesome. Speaking of Deus Ex Machina blood, and that's what I'm calling it, it's Khan's blood in this movie. And if you watch the movie, you will see that they discover that Khan's super abilities and super strength and speed, and it comes from the ability of his cells to constantly regenerate themselves. And so when Kirk dies in the movie, they use Khan's blood to bring him back to life. And it's what McCoy uses on the tribble, and the tribble comes back to life, so they're like, oh, let's, put Kirk on ice until I can get more of this blood and bring him back to life. Okay, so his cells are regenerating, he wakes back up. Awesome. There's a problem with this whole thing now that they've done for pretty much the remainder of these movies. Now pretty much nobody can die because they have Khan and all his friends in cryo. All of them are from the same race, so all of them should have the same capabilities in their blood. And they have cloning and stuff now. And so why not revive fucking everybody with his blood? So in the following movies, anytime somebody gets hurt or dies, my first question is going to always be, well, where's Khan's blood? Like, he should have just marketed that shit and sold it as, like, Vitamin Khan. I don't know. I mean, basically, the only other way that this can work out is everybody in Star Trek becomes fucking vampires. Like, it doesn't make sense. It's Deus Ex Machina blood. Basically, just brings people back to life for the sake of bringing them back to life and for the sake of having an easy way to get things done in a plot that really has no legs to stand on. Vampires in outer space, yeah. I wonder if they'll start to sparkle. That'd be funny. Speaking of things that have no legs to stand on, the vengeance theme in this movie, I've had enough. I'm over it. So here you have the USS Vengeance, I shit you not. And it's like this comically huge, black armored, like evil looking version of a starship from Starfleet. And it's like a weapon, basically. It's solely military, and it's got like big guns, and everything just like looks really thick and really evil and really ominous, but it's like, it's comically huge. Like, it's ridiculous size. It's funny. Like, I thought it was funny. Like, really? Really? This huge ship? Like, really? Why is it always a huge ship? Like the first movie with this new reboot. Huge ship. And they made the same mistake with Nemesis. Like, the Scimitar is a huge fucking ship. Like, why is that the threat? Obviously, that's not a threat. We've had enough of these situations ever since the Borg came out, where the ship is huge and like black armored and therefore evil. I'm thinking of a Voyager episode with the guy from that 70s show, The Year from Hell, parts 1 and 2. All these comically large ships, and this is something that I wonder about in Star Trek, but this really took the cake, because this is a Federation ship, and so now it's like, okay guys, come on. The only thing that I can make of this is that this is basically a space battle between IBM and Macintosh. And obviously the Enterprise is Mac and Vengeance is the IBM, and they're gonna like duke it out. And the only reason that the IBM / the Vengeance goes down is because of viruses, which the Enterprise / the Mac can't get. So it's perfect. I wonder, you know, if they really, like, maybe they have like PC people and Mac people on the team that makes these movies, and they thought it would be fun to like creatively, you know, display their little battle between one another. I don't know, but it was pretty weird. Like, the ship was just makes no sense, and it's got like a tiny crew on this huge ship, and it's supposed to be like an efficient way of doing this, right? Like, it can be piloted by one person. That seems like the dumbest fucking idea ever, to have something that's that dangerous that can be entirely controlled by a single person who may or may not be fucking sane at all. And like, Marcus is not sane. So great job, Starfleet, sucking at the whole responsibility thing here. So, but what's funny about the Vengeance theme, though, is not only the comically large ship, but the fact that Kirk's ending speech at the end of the movie is about how they don't need to be vengeful and have vengeance as part of their identity and blah, blah, blah. And I was kind of like, you mean the driving impetus between pretty much every action at any moment by any character in any of these movies, or in either of these movies, has been vengeance. And like, now at the end, we don't need vengeance, we're gonna rise above it all. Like, I just shoving shit down my throat, and I don't believe you. I don't believe you, Kirk, when you say that, because your actions tell me otherwise. I don't trust you. So here's a couple other things that made me go, what the fuck? Was that the guy from Prometheus at the Genius Bar on the bridge at the Apple Store? I mean, the Enterprise? 72 Virgin torpedoes? Space Bin Laden, is that you? Who's gonna fire 72 torpedoes to kill one guy in a deserted area of the Klingon homeworld, which is apparently not quite that deserted because a whole bunch of Klingons show up pretty much immediately. And speaking of patrol, another what the fuck moment. So let me see if I understand this correctly. Regarding the entering and exiting of ships from Earth, Starfleet can basically pick up life forms on other planets right here from the comfort of Earth, and has a whole system of monitoring pretty much anything that happens anywhere near Earth. Yet they always seem so surprised when anybody shows up. Like a huge ship being crashed into Starfleet, and everybody's just like, oh look, there's a huge ship coming. I wonder if it's gonna crash into the Earth and fucking kill us. Like, how could they not have seen that coming, like, from way before? Again, Starfleet is incompetent and irresponsible as far as I can tell in these movies. They're not able to detect ships in the immediate vicinity, or they choose not to care. And furthermore, they seem not to use any other ships besides the Enterprise. You literally see no other ships besides the Enterprise and the Vengeance, yet there are ships in space dock, but they never come out to play. So that's kind of boring, You want to see other ships. Like, the Enterprise is not the whole fleet, guys. That's not it. It's one part of what's supposed to be a team effort. So, we kind of missed the boat on that. Another what the fuck moment in this movie. If Khan was responsible for basically making the torpedoes for power-hungry Admiral Marcus, then would he really have loaded them up and armed them so that they could blow up? All right, laziest moment of the movie. They switch the death of Kirk and Spock. They kill Kirk instead of Spock. They redo the scene through the glass panes. And in truly lazy Hollywood fashion, Spock is now the one that does the Khan scream. You know what I mean? Like the part where William Shatner screamed Khan. The part where he was like, Khan! But like for way longer, and I can't do it. Yeah. Spock does that. Just think about that. Yeah, that's what I thought too. What the fuck? But I think the biggest problem that I have with this movie and with the previous Star Trek movie that came out, and just generally with this whole reboot, is that it has lost the point of Star Trek, the meaning of Star Trek. And I know I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but this is really my last what the fuck thing. Like, what the fuck way to kill it. It might be a fun action movie, and Star Trek nerds like myself can sit here and argue all day about the technicalities and about the Treknobabble and about all of that stuff. But when it comes down to it, the real issue with these movies is that they have lost the spirit of Star Trek. They've lost the point. They lost what Gene Roddenberry was trying to accomplish with Star Trek. They take these movies, they hit you over the head with things, they make easy, lazy callbacks to the original series, and it's an easy way to make a quick buck in Hollywood, as far as I'm concerned. Everything is a remake. Let's remake Star Trek. If they wanted to be creative, if they wanted to do good by Roddenberry and by Berman and by everybody else who's really busted their asses in Star Trek since its inception, way before I was born, they should have just continued the timeline, the original timeline. There was nothing wrong with the original timeline. We ended the movies with Captain Picard, and that's great. And frankly, you could have just kept going. A newer, more advanced crew that was true to the aesthetic, true to the style, and most importantly, true to the spirit of Star Trek would have been much more appreciated by myself. And I know other purists out there are also not really on board with this whole alternate reality thing. Again, it's lazy. gets rid of the need to create new characters, to create a new ship, to create new problems, new situations. Like, we're just going to take everything that's already been done in the original Star Trek and just redo it and make it slightly different and make a ton of money on it. And it's just not what Star Trek was about. You know, all of these visuals and stuff are great, but like I mentioned in my TNG Best of Both Worlds review, you know, even The Next Generation used to be granola on velvet that would make the texture of debris flying in the background and destroyed ships and stuff like that. And those episodes of Star Trek were so much more meaningful than either one of these movies. It didn't have the plot holes, it didn't have those problems. They relaxed on the visuals in order to focus on the things that mattered most about Star Trek, and that is not what this is about. Star Trek was about showing people that if they can embrace one another's differences rather than fight one another's differences, that we can be peaceful and productive and harmonious as a people, and therefore become ready to join the interstellar community of other life and other planets and other spacefaring beings. That was the idea, that if we can get past our own ego and accept and embrace the differences of others, that what we can accomplish as a people is limitless. That was the point. It was to show people that. It was to show people about equality, about rights. It was to ask the hard questions. It was to put the situation in front of you in a way that really removed it from the politics at the time that were being discussed, whether it was Cold War politics or whatever episode or series you might be thinking of. It was a way to separate you from how close an issue might be in order to get you to really think about it. It had a cerebral point to it. It had a message. And the new Star Trek reboot, it doesn't have any of that. It completely misses the point. And my fear with this, as with all reboots, is that when they go ahead and do Star Wars, J.J. Abrams, I'm looking at you right now, and I'm not happy. Okay? Please don't fuck up Star Wars as badly as you fucked up Star Trek, okay? Try to get the point of Star Wars, which I'm not going to go into in this video because that's another 20 minutes. But try to get the point of Star Wars before you go fuck that shit up too. Because this is not the face of a happy fan. And I'm one of the most dedicated Star Trek fans there is. So, all in all, cool visuals, some good writing, in scenes, in parts, good acting. But as a purist, I can't stand by this movie. I'm sorry. Sorry that got a little dark at the end, but I get really upset. So that's all I have for you today. Check back for more videos throughout the week. I definitely post every Friday. So if you don't catch the rest of my videos during the week, you'll at least be able to see them all on Fridays. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos. And don't forget to click like and thumbs up this video if you liked it. It makes all the difference in the world. Leave a comment. I want to know what you guys thought about this movie, whether you liked it, whether you didn't. And if there's any other Star Trek purists out there that share my feelings and also want to bitch or post a video response, I want to hear what you guys are thinking. So let me know. I will see you later this week. I will see you next week. I will see you when I see you in my next video. I love you guys. Have a great rest of your day / weekend / whenever you're watching this. Bye-bye.